In 1954, France believed it could lure the Viet Minh into a decisive battle. They built a fortress in a remote valley in northern Vietnam. They had artillery, they had air support, they had confidence. The Viet Minh dragged their guns through the jungle and surrounded them. What followed ended French rule in Indochina. In late 1953, French paratroopers descended into a remote valley in northwestern Vietnam. Dien Bien Phu was isolated. Ringed by steep, jungle-covered hills and connected to the outside world almost entirely by air. To French commanders, the location appeared defensible. The valley floor was broad enough for an airstrip. The surrounding hills seemed too rugged for heavy artillery. The Viet Minh were believed to lack the logistical capability to sustain large-scale siege warfare. The French had fought the Viet Minh for years in a grinding colonial conflict. They believed they understood their opponent. At Dien Bien Phu, they intended to force a decisive confrontation. The fortress would draw the Viet Minh into open battle. French firepower would destroy them. The valley became a network of fortified positions, strong points named after women. Beatrice, Gabrielle, Anne-Marie, Isabel. Artillery was emplaced, infantry dug in, supplies were flown in. From the air, the base looked formidable, but geography is not neutral. The French occupied the floor of a bowl. The Viet Minh would soon claim the rim. General Henry Navarre sought a battlefield where French advantages could be maximized. The French army possessed superior artillery, better access to air support, professional units with combat experience. Navarre's concept rested on 4 assumptions. First, the Viet Minh would attack conventionally. Second, French artillery could dominate open terrain. Third, air resupply would remain secure. Fourth, the enemy lacked the heavy guns to counter effectively. Dien Bien Phu was meant to be a trap. The French would defend a fortified base. The Viet Minh would be drawn into assaulting it. Casualties would mount. The insurgency would weaken. But the plan underestimated the adaptability of its opponent. It also underestimated the psychological shift underway. For the Viet Minh, this was not simply another battle. It was an opportunity to defeat a colonial power decisively. General Vo Nguyen Giap understood something the French did not. He did not need to attack immediately, he needed time. Rather than launching a frontal assault, Giap reorganized his forces. Artillery units were brought forward, not by truck, but by manpower. Guns were disassembled, carried piece by piece through jungle terrain. Raised onto hillsides overlooking the valley. Thousands of laborers carved roads by hand. Supply routes were cut through forest and mud. Camouflage concealed artillery from French reconnaissance. The French believed heavy guns could not reach the hills. When the first shells landed, that belief collapsed. Giap had transformed terrain into advantage, and he had done so quietly. On March 13, 1954, the Viet Minh opened fire. Artillery shells struck the strongpoint Beatrice with devastating precision. French defenses were shocked by the accuracy. Positions believed secure were destroyed within hours. Gabriel fell soon after. The pattern became clear. This was not harassment. It was systematic siege warfare. French artillery attempted counter-battery fire, but struggled to locate concealed positions. The Viet Minh had placed guns in hardened emplacements carved into hillsides. Firing ports were narrow, recoil systems were adapted. After firing, guns were rolled back into protective tunnels. French air power attempted suppression, but jungle canopy and elevation shielded the artillery. The siege tightened. The defining feature of Dien Bien Phu was elevation. The French were below, the Viet Minh were above. Artillery fired downward into trenches and supply depots. Observation posts provided clear targeting. French counterfire lacked comparable vantage points. The psychological effect was severe. Soldiers who believed themselves protected now felt exposed. Medical stations were struck, ammunition dumps ignited, communication lines were severed. Rain began to fall. Mud filled trenches. Evacuation of wounded became increasingly difficult. The fortress, once a symbol of strength, became confinement. The assumption that heavy artillery could not be brought through jungle terrain had proven disastrously wrong. The airstrip was the lifeline. Everything depended on it. Food, ammunition, reinforcements, medical evacuation. As artillery intensified, aircraft attempting to land were targeted. Planes burned on the runway. Eventually, direct landings ceased. Parachute drops replaced them. But parachutes drifted. Supplies fell into enemy-controlled areas. Resupply became uncertain. Wounded soldiers accumulated. Morale declined. Without the runway, the French position was no longer sustainable in the long term. The base had been designed as a forward anchor. It had become a fixed target. Trench lines advanced steadily toward French positions. The Viet Minh did not rush. They tightened. Strong points were isolated and overwhelmed. Counterattacks failed to regain lost ground. Rain intensified. Artillery continued. Food ran low. Medical care deteriorated. On May 7, 1954, the remaining French forces surrendered. Approximately 11,000 were captured. The defeat reverberated beyond the battlefield. A European colonial power had been decisively defeated by an anti-colonial army. The symbolism was profound. Dien Bien Phu ended French rule in Indochina. The Geneva Conference followed. Vietnam was temporarily divided at the 17th parallel. North and South emerged as separate political entities. The power vacuum did not create peace, it created realignment. The United States, wary of communist expansion in Southeast Asia, would soon increase its involvement. The siege demonstrated enduring principles. Terrain dictates outcome when misjudged. Logistics determine sustainability. Air power cannot compensate for encirclement without ground dominance. Underestimating a determined opponent invites strategic disaster. Dien Bien Phu was not simply a battlefield defeat, it marked the end of French colonial ambition in Vietnam. And it set conditions for a far larger war to come. If you value clear analysis of the decisions that shaped wars, subscribe for future episodes examining the turning points that changed history. This was the War Law.